Hello to all my guys, gals, and non-binary pals. It's Wick back with another Wicked Weekly Windup. This time, episode 14. And as you can see by the title, I'm doing another character analysis, this time starring Elphabethrop's younger sister, Nessarose. But if there was any specific character analysis that anyone wanted to see, feel free to let me know. Whether you leave a comment on this or if you, reach me by email or Discord, I try to leave those things in the description so that way people always know where I'm at. Because one thing I was possibly interested in doing, especially as we get closer to the release of the film, is maybe collect audio recordings from people about something they're really, really looking forward to, and then kind of stitching together all the audio recordings like a giant joint podcast. So if anyone's interested, feel free to start sending me your voice recordings now, and over the next couple of months I'll stitch them together so that it's something I can kind of release right before the film. But until we get to that date, for now, we just got the Nessa character analysis. And just follow me, folks, right this way down the Yellow Brick Road to Munchkinland. Alright, so story time, folks. Part of the reason Nessa's always resonated with me is because her dynamic with Elphaba kind of reminds me of my dynamic with my little sister. Now, granted, huge disclaimer, I want to say we're nowhere near as crazy as these two sisters. I promise my family we're like a very, 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 very watered-down version of the Throp family, no pun intended. Sorry, Elphaba, to mention water. But the big dynamic that what I'm referring to is, having a younger sister who needs extra care from the parents. Now, again, the thing that Nessa's dealing with is way more serious than what my sister ever dealt with. And depending on your canon, Nessa was either born without arms or born with her legs all tangled. But, in both situations, the younger sibling did require more care from the parent, and that kind of creates a very interesting dynamic. It's not just the sense of favoritism that Frex showed to Nessa, because luckily my parents were nowhere near as bad as Frex. Again, we're a very watered-down version here. But while the older sibling that sort of had to, push their needs to the side so the parents could focus more on the younger one would become hyper independent, the younger one would become hyper dependent. And I mean, we do see that in Wicked. The characters even call Nessa out for it. They mention that she has no idea how to care for other people because she spent her whole life being taken care of. But I just thought, honestly, that's a really good display of how that style of permissive parenting can unintentionally breed wickedness in a child, essentially. Like, I don't mean to sound like some moral high horse over here, but it's true. Like, learned helplessness, if you go around enabling your children or making someone feel like they can never do anything by themselves, they will begin to always learn and expect that somebody else needs to come in and save them, and they will never get the clue that they might need to save themselves. Because you even see that when Elphaba here tried to go defying gravity, it's years later when Nessa's like, you left me, and it's like it never once occurred to Nessa to make her own way. I mean, I know she was referring to Elphaba exclusively, and she did kind of make her own way, but that sense that, again, with Elphaba being the older sister that had to push herself aside, she had to be hyper independent because she knew her dad had to give more care to the younger child. So that's why she's over here like, listen, if I want change, I gotta be the change. I'm literally gonna fly out the wizard's tower right here, right now, in front of all of us. Don't even care. And then poor Nessa, kind of stayed helpless her entire life. Even as the Wicked Witch of the East with so much power over the Munchkin, she was still very much a slave of her fear and her helplessness, her fear of abandonment. That's why she went so crazy for Bach. And in my opinion, too, even I also thought Nessa did a good job of kind of embodying the phrase sins of the father, not just because of the religious undertones, but generational curses. Like we mentioned, it's not like they raised her to be evil, but Frex even at one point in the book says that he thinks Nessa's essentially gotten too religiously devout, and is like, well, who bred that into her? But it's meant to show, like, think about it. The environment shapes us. If Nessa grew up with a overly religious father, to her that was normal. So for her, the natural progression was to become even more extreme than him. And that's how we see wickedness propagate and extremism propagate, is the environment shapes us. The old question, are people born wicked or they have wickedness thrust upon them? It's always both. Because I mean, think about it with Nessa. It's not like she came out the womb evil, but because of the way she was raised, in a weird way, she was almost like destined to be, not evil, but just very needy. And not that being needy is bad, but it's more likely to lead people to do bad things, like the type of person Nessa became. We saw the shades of her in Act 1, magnified by Act 2. And again, in my opinion, that shows a great, essentially, child to adult development. I mean, at least as well as I could do, given how minor the character was. But again, just to go back to the enablement and learned helplessness, for example, if you think about the shoes that Rex gave her, they were a gift. It's not like she had to do anything to earn them. Whereas Elphaba over here felt like she spent her entire life working to try to earn her father's love. And we know you can't earn love. Like, if the people don't feel it, there's nothing you can do to force it. But that sense, again, of Nessa getting everything handed to her while Elphaba worked for everything, so one became very dependent and had a bit of a victim mentality of, I need to be saved. Whereas the other one was always told, go get it. If you want it, go get it. And not only that, this is the comedic line in the musical when Nessa goes, Elphaba, I'm an unelected official. Now, I know it's a funny line, but to me, it again kind of symbolizes her very role as the leader of Munchkinland. The imminent drop was handed to her. She didn't really have to know what to do, just it was hers, and she kind of got to choose what to do with it. Because, I mean, and then also made her another interesting foil to Elphaba is that she was actually the sister that succeeded in essentially defying the wizard. Because in the book, you guys, she succeeded Munchkinland away from Oz. I know they mention her being a dictator in the musical, but they don't specify like the politics that the book does, which is fair. But I mean, actually, there is a quote in the book. I wrote it down, but it's the one where Elphaba even says she isn't good at taking care of other people because she never learned how to take care of herself. Meanwhile, Elphaba's the opposite. She is not good at letting people take care of her because she never learned how to let people in like that. So that's why I thought they were really good foils to each other. Now on to kind of the second part of my analysis. It's sort of a continuation on the first. Sorry, I had to adjust the lighting a little. Guess some clouds must have passed overhead outside. But it sort of ties in with the learned helplessness, but it also mixes in the elements of goodness versus wickedness. You guys have always probably heard the phrase, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and many sentiments about the idea that suffering builds character. And to some extent, it's true. Like, really what it is that the idea is you go through an intense situation, good or bad, and you try to reflect on it and think, what can I learn from what I just went through? And so hopefully you're taking a more active role in shaping the person you want to become by choosing the lessons you learn. But of course, I'm not saying, okay, that means you should beat people up because I make them strong. Of course not. But again, we see this with Elphaba and Nessa, whereas essentially because Elphaba was told, hey, if you want it, go get it, she always had to take that active role, always facing adversity, whereas Nessa never did. She could always ask her dad or her sister to bail her out, which led to this sort of stagnation and entitlement, which led to selfishness and wickedness. Whereas the idea that she never grew up, she never seized her chance. The way Elphaba was willing to change her life, even if it failed, she was willing to try, and so she never stagnated. And at least that's why we watch Wicked. That's why we root for Elphaba. This idea that even though it sucks that she never succeeded in any of her endeavors, we're like, but there's a good woman who never gave up. Whereas Nessa, we kind of look at me like, she went crazy. She lost her mind. She gave up. So that's what I mean, is again, these parallels. Because in my opinion, goodness, real goodness is so rare and hard to come by. And that's not just me being religious or philosophical. It just literally almost to like a probability level. Because think about it, there's so many ways to be evil and it's so hard to be good that quite literally, again, I think Elphaba and Nessa do a great job of showing it, whereas Nessa's like the evilness in passiveness, where like because she never tried to change the situation, she's like, look at this, everything sucks. Whereas Elphaba's the opposite, where she tried so hard that she overdid it, and it's like she was trying so hard to be good that all she could ever do was remember all the ways where she wasn't. And then it became like the self-fulfilling prophecy if she was never good enough for her own idyllic standards of good, that she drove herself mad going, I'm wicked, I'm wicked, I'm wicked. Because, I mean, you know, in the musical, she was always being put down by the world. But in the book, she was always trying to get forgiveness for Fiero's death. Like, she could never forgive herself. So essentially, they're, again, excellent, I think, like cautionary tales of the extremisms. If you don't try hard enough to be good, you'll be evil. If you try too hard to be good, you'll be evil. Heck, you even see that with like Judge Claude Frollo type characters who, like Nessa, are religious nuts. And you'd think, but why though? Because religion's meant to be seen as like spiritually good. But as we know, sometimes the religious make the best villains, and that's, to me, it's the same deal. It's just that extremism I was talking about in the other portion of this video, where, you know, if you get so gung ho about being good, it turns toxic because you're like, we must be perfect, and whether it destroys you or other people, you know, for Elphaba it destroyed her sanity, and for Nessa it kind of wrecked Munchkinland because she was trying to force her religion onto everybody else. Yeah, real goodness is way harder because you still need to be proactive about it. It doesn't just happen, but you don't want to try too hard, and that's the old question. And actually, another minor, this is shorter analysis here, But Nessa kind of also reminds me of people who overcome adversity, and you'd think they'd be the most sympathetic to other people in their shoes, but sometimes they're the least sympathetic because they got over it. Like, even in the book, it mentions, because here's a trivia fact, y'all. In the book, Glinda is the one who enchanted the shoes to make Nessa walk because she was repairing them. That it was mentioned that after getting the ability to walk, Nessa did become even haughtier than before. And it's kind of sense of like, well, I can walk. See, look, I was healed. Why can't you? And you can kind of see that for a moment in the musical after she gets able to walk, she is a little independent for a moment. But then Bach tries to leave her, and she gets super mad, which is fair. You should never force people to be in a relationship with you, with the sense of like, I got through it. Why won't you be with me? I can walk now. And she doesn't realize that what's missing is the love. She's just looking at it from the very surface level. I should get the man now, right? I'm fixed. And if anything, she reminds me of the old Disney quote. Well, not that it was a quote from Disney, but about Disney. It was the whole evil queens of the princesses who are never saved. But notice even in that quote, it's passive. It's "were never saved." Like, did they? Not saying they never tried to save themselves, but the idea that because they weren't rescued, they became bad. In some ways, it strikes me that's kind of what Nessa's arc is. Because even though Elphaba wasn't rescued either, she did make more of an effort to rescue herself and to rescue others. Elphaba was, or Nessa was more likely to want to be calling on others. Oh yeah, and part of the reason I'm doing these video and segments is just to help all of us, both me and the viewers back home, to kind of break this analysis up. Since I know the last one went way longer than I thought it would, and so did this one. But that's good because there's so much to talk about these characters, you guys. Heck, I'd be glad to do podcast interview eps if people just send me in recordings about what they like about their characters, like ramble about something you love about Wicked, send it to me, and I'd love to make it into a video. But anyway, sorry. Because another thing I want to talk about is, in my opinion, Nessa's parallel to Glinda. Because, I mean, obviously I spent the whole last portion talking about Nessa and Elphaba because they're the sisters, but Glinda's also, like, literally the second most important female character of the play. And in many ways, because she's such a good follow to Elphaba, in my opinion, it's if A is good with B and B with C, then A and C also might be good. Because, for example, again, like, there's that quote in Wicked where the book where they're like the ruby slipper stood between Elphaba and Glinda as a symbol of their differences. And I'm like, man, you could replace Glinda with Nessa and the quote would still work really well. Because Glinda in many ways was sort of like Nessa. She was very spoiled. She had life handed to her. She was probably very much the favorite child. I mean, she was an only child, but you get my point. And both Glinda and Nessa stayed behind when Elphaba, jumped ship and dropped out of shiz and, and ran off, abandoned the wizard. Because granted, I mean, Nessa had no idea Elphaba was going to do that. But it really would be interesting to see maybe an AU where all three of them went to see the wizard, or if it was a Nessa AU. Because I could still see Nessa saying no. But that's what I mean, is the idea that Glinda and Nessa in many ways would make the same decision. Because they're sort of similar people. Even to be fair, if we think about it, like another thing I was reflecting on when I was writing this episode out was that in the musical, Glinda's actually responsible for hurting Nessa twice in the play. Because the first, if we think about it, was sort of when she set Nessa up with Bach as like a pity thing. Because even though that never negatively personally affected Nessa, like she never found out what Glinda did, and it ultimately ended up in her favor, it essentially set Nessa and Bach's relationship on the tragic course it was going to run, all because Glinda was like, I don't like this dude, go date the girl in the chair. And then when she's feeling salty over Green Girl here running away with Prince Fiero there, she mutters to Morrible, use Elphaba's sister, that'll draw her out. Which, low key, I have to admit, I'm undecided if I really want that. To me in the musical, I was like, damn, that's good. I kind of wish they had put it in the book, even though I know the book came out first. But then there were other points where I was like, man, that's just too cliche of that everyone was related to everyone and directly related to everybody's death. But I think, though, that did a good job of giving Glinda some real wickedness, And again, that's what Nessa is. She's another wicked foil to Elphaba who's kind of the good one of the trio. So that's why I kind of like them. And even the idea that maybe the two tried to bond and befriend each other after Elphaba left, because they would have both been deeply hurt by it as the two most important people in Elphaba's life, and now all they'd have is each other. But they still drifted apart, with Ness going back to Munchkinland and Glinda going to the Emerald City. And then while Glinda still pines for Elphaba, Ness is implied to think about her, but in a much more bitter, not like an I miss you, but where the F are you kind of way. Oh, and one more thing that I was kind of considering, like, when I was also reading this was just summarizing. I was rereading the Wicked book summaries just to make sure I wasn't missing any mentions of her in books 2, 3, and 4. And I remember now, can't believe I didn't. But when Dorothy goes on trial for her, I think that's actually a great summary too. How it shows the fluidity of goodness and wickedness and reputation. Because in book 1, everyone was doing the ding dong, the witch is dead. But by book 4, they're literally ready to hang Dorothy because she accidentally killed Nessa, and that just goes to show. And that's like the reverse of no, that's literally the Alphabet story where we all read L. Frank Baum's book and we're like, or saw the 1939 movie and we're like, ew, Margaret Hamilton, that witch is evil. But now we're like defying gravity. Like she's become an icon to us. It's kind of funny. Like imagine an in-universe wicked musical about Nessa is basically what I'm saying. All right. All right. So to close this out, I did want to talk about a couple Nessa quotes I really liked. And the first was said about her, but not by her. It was actually Elphaba reminiscing, and she thinks to herself, Nessa can see, but she cannot touch. What a curse for a child. No wonder she really thinks she couldn't see. Nothing is provable by touch. And I just thought that was a really, interesting quote about why Nessa might have been so drawn to religion is, it's true. The idea of the preacher would be like, this is something you can't see or touch, but it's real. And Nessa's probably sitting there thinking, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's real that I can't touch. So I think that's actually a really cool point. And then the other one was just, I kind of regret that they cut The Wicked Witch of the East from the soundtrack, because even though I understand it's a spoiler of a song and it's really more of a scene that is sung rather than like a song, I do tear up at the end when Nessa finally gets a little bit of reckoning. She's like, oh, me and that girl in the mirror, we deserve each other. Like, I always do tear up a little bit about that part. That's kind of funny because, like, she straight up literally almost killed Bach, and, like, her first thought is to think about herself, which I think, again, really highlights even the unintentionality of Nessa's wickedness, where just the problem is the poor thing's so mentally corrupt and selfish at that point that she literally doesn't know how to not think about herself. I mean, she was worried about Bach, and at first I was like, Elphaba, please save him. But even so, she's still like, oh God, what have I done? Like, you know what I mean? She can't stop thinking about herself. And that's something even actually Elphaba was struggling with the book, if you think about it, where all she's like is, I just want someone to forgive me. And I'm like, she spends her whole life thinking about herself and her forgiveness status, where in my opinion, if she could have thought about somebody else and totally given herself up to a different cause, she could have had a happier ending to her life. But she literally spent the end of her life in the book living at Fiero's castle, searching for that forgiveness. But anyways, that's almost drifting into an Elphaba analysis, and I, didn't mean for this video to be so long. So to keep things short, I will wrap it up here. But if anyone did sit through all of this, I hope you enjoyed. And again, feel free to let me know if you found this more visually entertaining to watch me talk, occasionally looking at my selfie, or if you prefer the PowerPoints where I kind of lay things out in a more organized way, because I was still reading off a cue card. But that is all I have this week. And I do hope to see everyone back in Oz with me, Wick, next week. Bye.